All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ole Miss After Dark. Joined here by Harrison Cordell Fant from SEC Unfiltered. He was kind enough to join me today. We're going to talk a little college baseball. College baseball's in full gear right now. Got one more non-conference weekend before we hit SEC play in what looks to be an absolutely loaded conference once again this year, maybe even more so than previous years. We'll get into that later on in the show. But Harrison, appreciate you joining me here today. How you been doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me. And, excited for conference play to start next week for the SEC and, the road to Omaha to continue because we know the road to Omaha runs through the SEC with 5 straight national championships by different schools. So can't beat it.
Yeah, that's right. With Ole Miss being one of them too, we can't leave that out. The Rebels did their part back in 2022, trying to get back to their winning ways after a couple subpar years. Right. So far, things are looking pretty good so far in Oxford. Looks like Joel Mangrum being added to the pitching staff has really helped out. One of the spark plugs for this team so far, though, because everybody kind of wondered how the hitting was going to be. We had so much turnover from last year to this year. But we've got a true freshman from Monroe, Louisiana, Hayden Federico, that once he's gotten plugged into that lineup, ends up hitting a walk-off Wednesday night against Murray State in the 10th inning. But he has been absolutely dynamic since he's been put into that leadoff spot. What have you seen out of Hayden so far this year?
Yeah, like you said, being productive in the leadoff spot's the biggest thing. And to do so as a freshman, is unbelievably hard, let alone to do so in the SEC. But obviously it's non-conference so far. Take it, with a little bit of a grain of salt because the SEC is a different beast. Seeing, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday arms in the SEC, the elite deep bullpens that teams all over the conference have. But you can't ask for a better start and a better season for him so far. Coming in as a freshman, true freshman at an SEC program like Ole Miss that has high standards. And he's batting 412 to start the season in 9 games. He's over 1,000 OPS. He's got a hit in every single game he's played in. It's unbelievable. He only has 5 RBIs, but, that's going to be more traditional with a leadoff spot, not being, a big RBI guy. But he's doing damage, doing his job getting on base and getting knocked in because he's on base so much. He's got 11 runs so far this season. So he's doing a phenomenal job and, really headlining that, offensive production so far for Ole Miss in that leadoff spot, like you said.
Yeah, and one thing that helps him with the runs, like you said, he's got hit in every single game. But one thing I've been really impressed with him so far is you look at his walk to strikeout ratio. He's got 7 walks and only 1 strikeout so far this year. Really good plate discipline from the switch hitter, and then you've got guys behind him too, right? Luke Hill, Ryan Moorman, Isaac Comforts, Judd Udemark, the big bopper, right? We've got guys behind him that are also playing well, but that's why somebody like Caden at the top of the lineup is so important. They've done a really good job with lineup construction so far this year. Kind of feels like they're settling in a little bit. Kind of outside of Hayden, are there anybody else, Luke Hill, Judd Udemark, Ron Moorman's a guy that's come in, the transfer from Illinois, that has really swung the bat well for us. Just the top of that order overall has been impressive to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one thing you hit on. I was going to bring it up if you didn't there about his strikeout to walk ratio with Hayden Federico. As a freshman to have the kind of the plate discipline and control the zone that he has, only having 1 strikeout and 34 at bats, let alone having 7 walks. That 7-to-1 walk to strikeout ratio for a hitter, that's unbelievably good to have. Of the qualified starters in Ole Miss, he's the only one that has less than 7 strikeouts, and he's got 1 strikeout. It's absurd to kind of see that as a freshman in the SEC doing that and getting the role and opportunities that he's had. So he's making the absolute most of them. And just I've been really most impressed. I think with that, like you said, just kind of the plate discipline as a freshman and knowing how comfortable he looks and feels in the box, obviously. But another name, I think you can't go without saying Judd Udemark. Just the bat that he brings to the plate, it feels like he's seeing beach balls there. 7 home runs. He leads this team so far, 14 RBIs, tied for the lead for the Rebels as well. He's just on base. I think he's tied for the most total bases of the team also, and just being the absolute nucleus of this Rebels offense. And it's easy to see why with how he swings the bat and just the confidence he has as well at the box. And it kind of seems to just ripple throughout the lineup so far and passing the baton to the next guy, letting them, hey, showing them and giving them confidence, energy in the box to, go out there and do their job. And a lot of guys in this lineup are really doing their job so far in non-conference.
Yeah. Judge really having that breakout year that we've been waiting for a couple of years here in Oxford. A guy that obviously the first couple of years he battled injuries, had a ton of swing and miss. He still has plenty of swing and miss. That's going to come with a guy like Judge. He's going up there to hit bombs, right? I'll never forget back when Sykes Orvis was on the team. I ended up running into him on the square after a game one day, and he hit an absolute nuke to out into the student section. I was like, dude, I said, you hit the hell out of the ball. And he goes, I ain't going up there swinging for singles, bro. I'm going up there trying to hit some nukes, and that's what Judd's doing. But look, he's doing a good job making contact too, though. Yeah, he's got 17 strikeouts, got 6 walks to go with, but he's hitting 311. He's got the double, like you said, 7 home runs, 14 RBIs. If we can get that kind of production out of Judd Udermark in the middle of this lineup, then we're really set up to score a bunch of runs, I think, because right behind Hayden Federico is a guy named Luke Hill, second year in Oxford, transferred in after his freshman year at Arizona State, had a great year there with the Sun Devils, and a guy that we talked a lot about on our show because Luke got off to such a slow start last year. But me and my co-host Hitch, every time we would come on here, every single week, and people would be talking about Luke Hill, we keep saying, hey, stay with him. He's going to be fine because he hits the ball so hard every single time he makes contact with it. He barrels it up. And then you saw that come to fruition in SEC play. Numbers obviously took a big jump. And then you look this year, he's off to a much better start, clearly. But it's the same Luke Hill we saw all last year. He's just not hitting them directly into somebody's gloves. Hitting 421 so far this year, OPS over 1,200. 1 home run, a triple, 11 RBIs, 3 stolen bases. And again, another guy that has more walks than strikeouts, 10 walks, 7 strikeouts. So, you look at that combined between Federico and Luke Hill, that's 17 walks and 8 strikeouts between your top 2 guys before you get to Ryan Moorman, Judd Udermark, Isaac Humphries, Mitchell Sanford, another transfer that's played well. Luke has been a really big piece to this lineup as well in that 2-hole.
Absolutely. When they're not striking out, they're either walking or getting on base or making loud contact. And, it helps run pitchers' pitch counts up. But like you said, he's got 3 home runs. He's tied his career high here at Ole Miss with 3 home runs already. It's not even conference play yet. He's already got a triple, which, he had 1 last year. He's just off to an incredibly hot start, and just something that the talent that he has and brings to the plate and to the team, is great to see, and a huge, huge asset for this Ole Miss team. But, when you talk about that, and you go into the pitching side of it too, right? You go in the pitching side for Ole Miss and just how elite that is been, headlined by no other than Hunter Elliott, vital piece of the 2022 National Championship team. He's 3-0, which I don't take too much credit or, put too much weight into wins. But when it's as good as his stats are, with a 0.0 ERA in 16 innings with 6 hits, and obviously strikeout to walk ratio really good, 20-8. He hasn't allowed a run all season. He's looked so dominant. And Chris and I talked about it on SEC Unfiltered, just about how important Hunter Elliott, especially, but also Riley Maddox, just 2 guys that have battled their fair share of injuries, are going to be so important to this team, just being on that national championship team and just being the frontline starters and needing a full healthy season, because that is what's going to drive Ole Miss into the postseason and deep into the postseason, is those 2 headline guys. And Hunter Elliott's proved so far this season to be one of, if not the best starters in the SEC so far.
Yeah. Hunter coming back from that Tommy John surgery, obviously. And you look at the batting average again. So he's only given up a batting average of 122 so far this year. And you mentioned the K to walk ratio, 20-8, and all 8 of those walks came in 2 games, right? 5 of them coming from this past Friday. I'm glad you brought up the win-loss too. I'm a guy that doesn't really believe in the win-loss. The one time I will put any sort of credibility on it, though, was this past Friday night, because Hunter Elliott obviously didn't have his best stuff, but he went up there and he competed and he battled, knowing he didn't have his best stuff. Still got through 5 innings, only giving up a hit, and really kept Ole Miss in that game. Obviously, the offense did their part as well, but that's what an ace does, though, right? You go up there, even if you don't have your best stuff, you still find a way to give your team some depth, keep them out of that bullpen for at least 5, maybe even 6 innings, and then you still come away with the win. And then Riley Maddox, like you mentioned, he's got a 4.05 ERA. You look at that and like, well, you probably want that to be a little lower going into SEC play, but all of that literally happened in 1 inning in Arlington against Texas, right? And all of that started with a play that should have been made there in the 4th inning, I believe it was, 3rd or 4th inning. But I thought Riley Maddox has looked really well so far this year too.
And the biggest thing is like they have a combined, they give 18 hits combined, 3 extra base hits
Yeah.
total between the two of
Mm-hmm.
them. That is just shows the
Mm-hmm.
depth of how even when they're getting hit, it's not often for extra base. It's not really getting barreled that much, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
just kind of shows, I think, more details and can slip under the radar about how good their starts have been so far, and hell in the way. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, like you said, it saves a lot of innings that bullpen doesn't have to worry about. And so you don't get in a hole on a Friday night or a Saturday, and just have to use a lot of bullpen. And then Sunday, it's like scrambling because we used a lot of our bullpen on Friday or Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a huge piece, I think, that needs to be given more credit to in situations like this, but in general as well.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of Friday and Saturday, obviously what comes next is Sunday, and we have another veteran guy. That's another thing about this pitching staff. These are 3 guys that have not only been in this program a while, they've thrown a bunch of innings, and all 3 have national championship rings. Riley Maddox was hurt when we made that run to the national championship, but we don't win national championship without Hunter Elliott and our Sunday guy, Mason Nichols. He gets plugged in there last year basically by necessity because we just didn't have anybody else there on Sundays. And Mason's come out and he's just kind of picked right back up where he left off, right? From a Sunday standpoint, Mason Nichols has looked really well, fills up the strike zone. Struck out 10 in his last outing this past Sunday, but he's got a 17-3 K to walk ratio right now. He's not giving anybody free passes. If you're going to beat Mason, you're going to have to hit him.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is he's not giving free pass up with walks, but really high strikeout per inning ratio as well, 17 strikeouts in 11 innings. But he is filling up the zone, like you said, a lot, but it could be maybe a little too much, more than the middle plate, and that's why he's getting hit a little bit more and giving up the runs he's given up so far. The ERA doesn't reflect, I think, how talented and important he's going to be for Ole Miss this season. The Sunday roll, I mean, the 5.73 ERA, obviously not great, especially when you compare it to a 0.0 ERA, and then Riley Maddox with just over a 4. So looking for that to kind of tighten down a little bit, and you just get more comfortable in the role, but also miss barrels more, and some of that's going to be picking more at the edge of the zone because he's got really good control. He's shown us that the stuff is there, can play in the SEC, and so it's just going to be how does it play in the SEC and conference play, which starts next weekend.
Yeah. That's the thing. We're going to get answers to all of these questions in the not too distant future. One more week of non-con, get into conference play after that. Real quick, I just want to highlight a few bullpen arms that I've been really impressed with. If any of these have stood out to you so far this year, feel free to chime in. Connor Spencer, I thought has looked really well. Struggled a couple of times with control. Not this past weekend, the weekend before against Eastern Kentucky, but comes in, slams the door this past weekend. I thought he's looked really good. Fastball has a lot of life to it. Upper 90s guy there. Mason Morris, another guy that we've used mainly to piggyback off of Hunter Elliott on Fridays. Used him on Sunday with Mason Nichols after that Big Ten strikeout performance. He's come in, again, another guy that's running it up 96, 97 miles an hour. And then we've got the freshman Walker Hooks, who came in the 10th inning Wednesday against Murray State and has come in over the weekend a couple of times as well. And he's been really impressive to me. Big lefty out of Brandon, Mississippi. 129 ERA, 10 strikeouts to 2 walks. Allowing a batting average of .087. Again, all these guys you'll find out once you get into conference play how their arms and their abilities really play. Braden Jones, I want to throw him in there as well because even though he got knocked around a little bit on Wednesday, he had that really big spot against Southern Miss a couple of weeks ago, bases loaded. One no outs, comes in, gets us out of that jam to secure that win for us. But it seems like Ole Miss is starting to find some bullpen pieces to complement that starting rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the name I want to highlight, like you said, is Walker Hooks. Just to do what he's done as a freshman so far and put up great numbers. I mean, he's got a .57 whip. I mean, the strikeout to walk ratio, 10-2, obviously is great, especially in 7 innings. He's locked it down. He hasn't given up but 2 hits, 1 run. I mean, to do that as a freshman in a role in the SEC is only going to play up to his career. And like I said, I mean, he's 6'4", 265. He is a
big guy.
Boss. He's a big dude, especially for a freshman. I expect him to probably be a weekend starter, if not, early weekend starter next year. I mean, he was a starter in high school. He tossed over 70 innings, over 100 strikeouts, and he hit over 300. I mean, he's first team All-State. I mean, he's pitched in championship games. He led his high school team to a state championship last season. he's going to be, I think, a big name for his career in Ole Miss that people are going to start to remember. Hopefully this season, and if not, next, because I think he'll be an important piece of probably the starting rotation next year for sure. So getting a lot of quality innings now and showing that he can compete in the SEC and is here for a reason, and he's proven that so far.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think next year you start looking for him to enter that weekend rotation. Obviously, we'll be replacing all three starters by the time next year rolls around. We're going to enjoy this season before we have to get to Walker Hooks holding down Friday or Saturday, whatever that ends up being in 2026. Kind of what's your outlook for this Ole Miss team? Your latest power rankings this past week has them at number 8, which obviously puts them firmly in the tournament, right? If you're the 8th best team in the SEC, you're not only firmly in, you've got a chance to push for a host late in the year if you're number 8 earlier this year, right? So kind of what's your outlook for Ole Miss? What are you looking for them to do? And kind of what's your projection by the time the season's over with?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming this season, obviously expectations are high in Oxford in general for baseball, but let alone winning a national championship less than 5 years ago. And then, your rival winning one the year before. I think Ole Miss is going to expect to get back to Omaha every year, which is insanely hard to do. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's insanely hard to do and not really a consistent thing. But, deep postseason runs, I think, hosting regionals, going to super regionals almost every year, if not every year. It's kind of the expectation around Oxford. And I know you could probably attest to that as well. But I think the middle of the pack of the SEC is a really interesting aspect and area to be in because it's so deep. And I think the difference between, 5th in the SEC and 11th, 12th in the SEC is probably, come late April, going to be 3 games. So, you could be 11th in the SEC and you're still ranked because of how elite and deep the SEC is, because you're just gonna be a lot of teams are gonna be beating up each other in the middle, right? Especially with 16 teams now. And you got to remember, all 16 teams go to the SEC tournament this year. So that's a new thing with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas. But I right now I see them in the upper half of that middle tier of the SEC, and proving that they can compete, and especially with the starting pitching they have, as long as they continue to stay healthy, which I hope they do. They've been a lot of fun to watch and really talented players, and are just such big core nucleus piece of this team is Hunter Elliott and Riley Max because of just their length around the program, the veteranness they have in the locker room, the leadership roles that they, bring, and obviously the performance on the mound. But that upper kind of second middle tier of the SEC is where I kind of expect them to kind of finish. I had them, I think, coming into the season about, I want to say 10 or 11, maybe.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, which is, I think, a fair, number because, you're hoping you get Hunter Elliott sharp off the rip of the season, right? And hoping, everyone stays healthy and, who's going to break out or not. And like the guys we've talked about that have really broken out so far this season, like I don't think people would have said, these freshmen coming on campus would have, jumped on the scene and just had incredible starts to the season like they had. Like we see it happen more often than it doesn't. We see it happen more often than it feels like it should, because these freshmen are just so talented coming to the SEC, especially with the shrinking of the MLB draft from 40 to 20 rounds, and NIL, the transfer portal, everything kind of around that. It's making the game of college baseball that much better, and the talent bed that much deeper and richer, and that's only proving more in the SEC. So, like I said, I think hosting a regional is, I think, the minimum expectation for Ole Miss. We talk about the SEC tournament with some people that also cover college baseball, and some teams approach it differently. If you're think about Tennessee last year, they're winning the SEC tournament doesn't do anything for them really, except for, they won SEC regular season champs. But some teams are fighting, to make the postseason. They need a deep run in the tournament. So that approach, how things are kind of strategically managed and whatnot is really interesting to me. I don't see Ole Miss in that kind of fighting situation. It's more of a, 2-3 seed is like baseline, but they definitely have the opportunity to host. They have and put together a really strong SEC season and have a lot of healthy guys and as many people as they can healthy in the season, because that's what's going to come down to. And, running the gauntlet of the SEC, I think that's the most important thing. And just winning the series at home and not getting swept on the road. That's how you play postseason baseball. That's how you make the postseason. I'm not saying that should be, the goal, but like that should be the floor. And as a program like Ole Miss and the talent that they have, I think that is the floor.
Yeah. That's kind of the baseline, like you said. Win your home series, don't get swept on the road. And Ole Miss is in a really interesting situation. We kind of chatted for a second before we started recording that their home series are all of these top 25 teams. Like right now, 12 to 16 teams are ranked, right? And we get Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, and I'm forgetting one, uh, Vanderbilt at home. But then the four teams that aren't ranked, we actually draw all of them, and they're all on the road. So your Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Mississippi State, a lot of good teams in that group still. They're just not currently ranked. It's not like you're going to look at those and go, okay, yeah, we'll just go sweep those and it'll be fine. It's just kind of flopped where Ole Miss might have to make a little more hay on the road because their home schedule is so brutal. But at least you get those teams in Oxford, though. You get that little bit of advantage getting them at Swayze Field. Speaking of which, SEC play.
That's not even to mention the Shriners Children's College Showdown they played in, which they played three top 25 teams in Arizona. It's a huge win, 2-1 in that game. Then you play number 19 Texas. You get run rule in 7 innings, 10-0. But then you come back the next day and just flip a switch. You bounce back. You forget what happened yesterday, and you run rule the number 15 team in the country in Clemson. I mean, you're playing in an MLB ballpark too. I think that's going to go a long way for the pedigree of this team. But also, those are huge wins when it comes down to RPI and whatnot at the end of the season. So I think those have to be remembered for sure.
Yeah. And then you even in a hindsight situation, Arizona struggled in Arlington, right? Well, they've really bounced back and played really well since then. They've picked up some really good wins, including over Mississippi State. And then Clemson goes and sweeps South Carolina either the weekend after or 2 weekends after that run rule there in Arlington. So those wins are only going to get better as the year goes on, like you said. But kind of talking about the SEC as a whole, we see what's going on with basketball right now. It's widely regarded as the best basketball conference potentially of all time, with as many teams as they're talking about getting into the NCAA tournament. Is there a chance that the SEC, who has always been king in baseball, also rises to being that dominant in baseball? Like we've always been the team, like you said, Omaha runs through the SEC, but is there a step higher that this conference can take even this year?
On basketball or in baseball?
Baseball.
I mean, I don't know if there's really a step you can take higher. I mean, we've had these conversations about, does the SEC have a better chance of winning the national championship in baseball or basketball this year? And people I've talked to, we still think baseball, just because you win 5 straight national championships by 5 different schools. But then you talk about, is the SEC deeper in baseball or basketball? I think it's deeper in basketball right now, maybe, but it's really close. And obviously, basketball is deeper in the season, and baseball is, just now getting into things conference play wise. But it's a really interesting kind of thing to think about throughout the season, and just showing you that the SEC is an all sports conference and the all sports conference. But talking about, just other teams around the SEC, the biggest jump so far for me has been Oklahoma. I had them I think I had them around 10, 12. Just because I wasn't sure how the offense would do. I was really impressed with the Witherspoon twins coming into the season. Skip Johnson's club, we know they're going to be able to pitch at a very high level. But the quality of wins they've had, I know they got blown out by DBU in a midweek. Dallas Baptist is a very good mid-major. And my dark horse last year to go to Omaha, probably a dark horse this year to Omaha, and one of the best mid-major teams in the country consistently. They've made the biggest jump. Texas looked really strong. And I'm obviously not mentioning Tennessee, Florida, LSU as the top, because I had those 3 at my top coming in. Obviously, the Texas A&M situation storylines is just very fascinating to follow, just because of everything that's involved. It's such a deep kind of storyline, and just everything around it. It's a lot to get into, but that's good for Ole Miss when you think about it. That's one less dog at the top, right? But Alabama's been very impressive as well. Arkansas has been exactly what I expected them to be, but Ole Miss is, trending in an upwards direction. I think, let's see. I had them in my top 5, most impressed. They're number 5 of my best impressions opening weekend. And, I think that says a lot, especially the talent that they've played. They've been upper middle of the pack for me all, season long, because I do my SEC baseball power rankings based on-field performance only, not counting any preseason, rankings of my own or D1 baseballs, which I'm not huge on, or, Perfect Games or, Baseball America or whatnot. It's based on, the talent and the things I see in the field, the statistics that back it up and whatnot, and, the strength of schedule, things like that. So that's kind of like shows how deep the SEC is. And it's going to, like I said, 6 through 12 are going to be a couple games away. So you might be in, 5th, 6th, 7th. 2 weeks later, you're, 10th, 11th. And then, 2 weeks later, you're 6th, 7th again. It's just depending on the kind of ebbs and flows and how everyone's schedule is laid out too. But Ole Miss is definitely in the mix for upper third, pushing top 5 in the SEC, I think, this season with what they've shown us so far and the elite level that they can play at against these teams like Arizona, Clemson, and just a lot of quality mid-majors too.
Yeah. Obviously, we played Southern Miss already, beat them. We'll play them again later on in the year in the midweek as well. Well, Harrison, before I get you out of here, SEC play starts next weekend. Give me a quick rundown of what maybe Ole Miss can expect from the Arkansas club coming in from Swayze. What have you seen from them so far?
Yeah, I mean, Arkansas, when you think Arkansas, you think of pitching. When you think of Dave Van Horn's club, you think of pitching, elite pitching, almost a pitching factory. It feels like just starters, relievers, bullpens, closer, everyone on the staff, and just the struggles that it feels like continue to have hitting wise. And I think compared to other clubs, the lack of depth on the offense, like I'm going to compare them to a Tennessee or Florida and just the depth that they have 1 through 9. Any one of them can beat you and do damage. Any one of them can hit a home run. That's not the case for Arkansas. I think, they want to play in these 3-1, 2-0, 4-2 ball games, 4-3 ball games. That's where their bread is buttered and they really thrive in. And they've proven that to us. Win or lose, that's where they kind of are always in the mix in those low scoring games. So the key for Ole Miss is going to be getting pressure, on, I think, Arkansas's pitching, because I don't think the way I see it right now, Ole Miss is pitching with Hunter Elliott and Riley Maddox and, the bullpen arms that we've talked about have really too much of a concern of Arkansas's offense. I mean, Kendall Diggs is a really talented player over at Arkansas, and, the Aloy twins. I mean, Kahui Aloy, he's leading the SEC in batting average, batting over, I think it's 550 almost. It's absurd. It's insane. I mean, it's really just going to be slowing down the twins or the brothers there, but really the younger brother. And, because I don't think they're going to beat you 1 through 9 in the lineup, but they might beat you, pitching staff wise. They might, slow down the Ole Miss lineup, and, Judd Uttermark might not have a good game. And then, the rest of the line just doesn't have a ton of production around it. That's the only way I see Arkansas beating Ole Miss, and they absolutely can do that. But like I said, it's going to be about Ole Miss getting to Arkansas's pitching and putting them in a hole early, because putting Arkansas in a hole early offensively is not where they want to be and not where they're able to thrive, let alone produce a lot of offense.
Yeah. I actually had a conversation about this the other day. Arkansas got brought up, and somebody's like, well, I haven't been that impressed with them. I was like, look, man, they pitch the hell out of the ball. Okay. Going in there, they want to win those 2-1, 3-2, 4-2 games, something like that. If they ever figure out how to hit the ball, that's when they become a very, very dangerous team, because
and that's the problem.
Ever since Dave Van Horn's been there, they're going to throw it.
Yeah. And that's the problem. Last year, like they would beat Omaha last year if they batted 500, middle of the pack SEC. They batted second to last in SEC batting average wise, ahead of only Missouri. And they were still a top 7, top 5 team hosting a regional with a really good chance to go to Omaha. That's the biggest thing that is, I think, frustrating for Razorback fans. But I mean, like I said, it's just, you got to get past Gabe Gakel on a Friday night, which he struggled last week's outing, his worst of his career, which I don't expect to happen much that bad, let alone often. And then you got to face Zach Root on Saturday. I mean, and then Sunday, they have a lot of good arms they're going to throw at you too. So, like I said, it's going to be getting the pitching staff, drawing a lot of walks, not chasing like a lot of the Ole Miss guys are very patient and very good plate discipline. And, taking opportunities when they're there, getting guys on, Judd doing what he does, hits the long ball really well and putting pressure on Arkansas to score, which they don't do a lot.
Yeah. And look, super excited to get this thing started. Obviously, I love all baseball season, even the non-con, but juices start flowing a little bit differently when you get to SEC play week in and week out, because
Absolutely.
you're going to be into a dogfight for 3 days every single weekend for the next 10 weeks, and that's just a lot of fun to go through as a fan, obviously. And obviously, I'm quite a big Ole Miss fan, so I enjoy the hell out of it myself. But Harrison, I'll go ahead and get you out of here, buddy. I appreciate you joining me here. Really great conversation. Really love your insight. And I'll be in touch, and maybe we'll get you back on here maybe halfway through the conference slate, something like that. And we'll kind of see where SEC baseball is sitting at that point.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, always enjoy going to Ole Miss. I've been there. I went in 2022 for a game. It was against, I'm trying to think who it was against. I can't remember. It was actually graduation weekend. It was that Sunday. So it wasn't as crazy as, normally I didn't get to experience the full Swayze crazies, but got to see some guys there celebrating, graduation and watching some good baseball. The thing about the stadium before I got it is just like from the outfield, it's really deceiving because the whole grandstands is white. Trying to just try to blend that ball in. It's hard to pick up, and we've seen it. South Carolina struggled there. Other teams have struggled there with like line drives. Kind of that dusk time. Some nighttime as well. Just really tough place to play in. The Swayze Crazies obviously love baseball. You guys are huge baseball fans. Obviously, it's not the Grove. It's not Ole Miss football, but Ole Miss baseball is big, and it's a good one to see Ole Miss playing well and the fans into it because it's a great atmosphere to be around.
Yeah. I actually have the hot take that's not very popular with really much of any Ole Miss fans. I'd much rather be in Swayze than in the Grove. I mean, give me that over the Grove all day, every day.
Never been to the Grove, but I will go back to Swayze this year. Hopefully.
Yeah. I'm just a big baseball fan, so I love sitting out in the outfield, get me a cooler, beer, a chair, and you can leave me alone for the next 4 or 5 hours, whatever it takes at that point. You're not going to hear me complain one bit. But yeah, if you end up making a trip back to Swayze, holler at me. I'm not far. I'm sure I'll be up there several times this year too, and maybe we'll meet up there and we'll share some cold one there in the outfields as well.
Will do. I'll let you know. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Thanks a lot.